Knit Along first Zoom session. I'm really excited for us to be hosting our first week check-in. We have a lot of people who are joining us too, who are just beginning the shawl. So that is really lovely to have them joining us. And we have other people who have been knitting like the wind and who are partway through. So we are going to start off with a little bit of housekeeping, give you a bit of an outline of what we're going to be doing. I think there's still a waiting room, Dan, so if you can keep admitting people, that would be fabulous. And then we have some of our really special guests with us here today. So we have Carrie Bogart from Interweave, and we have Lana Joy, our designer. So welcome, ladies. I'm so glad that you could join us because let's face it, the joy of a KAL is to get together and chat our favorite subjects of knitting and all of the goodness. So yeah, I'm really excited to have everyone here. So without further ado, the housekeeping. We are recording this meeting because there's a lot of people who can't make this time zone, but they want to watch it later. So the meeting is being recorded. If you don't want to be on screen, all you have to do is turn your camera off, and that's just fine. So just to be aware that there is a recording running, and there is also a live transcript going at the bottom. And if you don't see it and want to turn it on, just go to your meeting settings and you can enable it there. If you're having any trouble with that, just pop a question in the chat, and my lovely and talented partner behind the scenes will help you with that sort of detail. The other thing is that right now we're just going to have everybody muted, but we're going to have tons of time today for like Q&A and getting to know each other and chatting about our progress and so on. But I want to give some tips and tricks as part of the start of the meeting for those who are just starting the shawl. And then we're also going to have Lana give us a description of her design process, and you'll get a chance to meet the designer up front. So microphones will be off for that, and then I'll let you know when you can unmute and ask all the things that you have ever wanted to ask in one of these meetings of an amazing designer and team behind the fabulous crew of Interweave, because man, I got to tell you, they are knocking it out of park on this one. I cannot believe the amount of help that they have provided, and the videos that they have done for tutorials are amazing, and Carrie monitoring and moderating that forum, wowzers. So yeah, really excited. All right, so without further ado, we have the housekeeping out of the way. Let's introduce Lana Joy. Lana is a designer that I have been following for a number of years now, and she's absolutely amazing with her shawls. She is a true artist, and I really enjoy knitting her patterns because they teach me something every single time. So yeah, I do encourage you to look at the rest of Lana's work. There's a whole lot out there, and she does more than just shawls too. She does a lot of really beautiful garments. So you could spend a lifetime working with Lana's patterns and never ever feel the lack of else. So welcome, Lana.
Thanks so much, Caroline. Such kind words. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
So Lana, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you live and what brought you into the world of designing?
I live in India. I'm from India. And I started knitting maybe about 15 years back. And I've always been a crochet girl. I've been crocheting since I was a little girl, and knitting just happened. So I learned to knit from a co-worker on the bus, and the first thing I learned was that I couldn't follow a pattern. I'm making my own shawl now, and apparently I can't even follow my own pattern. So the only terrible thing about being in India and knitting is the weather. I can hardly wear the sweaters I make. So that's probably why I'm a shawl person. So shawls, lace, and the weather here they go perfectly well together. So that's why all those shawls from me.
Well, that's fantastic. And I have great sympathies because I have always been a person with a very special personal climate zone. So I can't wear very many sweaters either. So I was big into shawls right from when I first started knitting too. So did you have a specific inspiration on this shawl? Because it was really beautiful. I'd love to know more about that.
This shawl, yes. So with my cultural background, we're big on colors, that. We love our reds and yellows and oranges. So we love color. But then I'll tell you something. Much as I love to try new techniques with knitting, I've always been morbidly afraid of stranded color work. 2 colors, 3 colors at the same time. Oh my God, even the thought of it is scary. So I've always been afraid. I do it now, but then I've always been intimidated by trying it. And but then I've always wanted to make very colorful things. So my next best friend, mosaic knitting. So you just use 1 color at a time and you end up with something gorgeously colorful. So that was one thing. And the second thing is I really like experimenting with new stitches. And the star stitch in this shawl was really intriguing. It's lovely. It doesn't look like, you just use 2 colors every 2 rows. So they all kind of fit together. And there you go. You just had to keep changing colors with every tier, and you had a very colorful shawl. And at the end of the day, it's not very difficult. It's fairly easy to make once you get the hang of it, this shawl. So that was largely behind this design, this particular design.
Well, that's fascinating. And it's lovely to hear the background too. I don't know why I was suddenly muted there. I will admit that I was terrified of color work too. And I am kind of horrified to think about how many years I've been knitting now, because that means that I'm running out of years to knit in a way. And I avoided color work for, dare I say, more than 40 years, because the idea seemed thing. Then I started to get all panicked at the bare idea of it all. And so I did exactly the same thing, where I started off with things like slip stitches, because I could get that look of multiple colors, but I could feel like I had a little more control of it. And it did finally give me the courage to start doing stranded color work, but I'm kind of horrified to realize that that's only been like 3 or 4 years that I've been actually knitting with multiple colors in 1 row. But things with the slip stitch, oh yeah, lots and lots of time. So yeah, that's really fun. And then the name of it is so perfect, because they do look like gems. And I think the star stitch is very much like stars twinkling in the sky too. I also thought, for the rest of you, Lana was really clever in the version of star stitch that she chose, because some of them, you look at the stitch dictionary and it'll be like, this is star stitch. And then it's got this enormously complex thing that you're doing. And it kind of looks like, in the end, just kind of a little snarl in the yarn. So I really like this version because it's so clean and clear, and it's nice and easy to execute. So yeah, I'm really impressed by that. Did you have any other thoughts on the shawl that you'd like to share?
So I got going thanks to the very wonderful yarn that Caroline has been so kind to send me.
So for those of you who are curious, by the way, Lana has fabulous taste and chose the purple kit. They're all beautiful, but go purple.
Go purple indeed. So this is how far I got. And I'll tell you, when I started, and I had to change color on the wrong side, my first thought was, what was I thinking? But see, this is how this stitch works. The thing is, you make the manipulations on a right side row. So when you do that, you're actually working on the stitches of the previous row. So if you changed color on every right side row, then you'd have this weird thing going on where your stitch is half of a color and the other half, the top half, is another color. So I quickly realized that that's not the look we want. You don't get those stars, you get some half color change things. So I realized that, the base row, the wrong side row, has to be in the same color, so that when you do the manipulations on the right side, you get the star pattern. So I had to introduce a new color on every wrong side row. And this is where the Interweave team comes in. I'm pretty sure any other magazine would have said, are you out of your mind? We can't do this. So they entertained me. They indulge me quite a bit. So this pattern just sailed through, and here we are. So that is why we're changing colors on the wrong side row. For all those of you who have been cursing me, this is it. I'm so sorry.
Well, one of the things that's really fun as somebody who is, okay, I'm going to admit it. I have been knitting to my horror for 53 years. I am apparently not a spring chicken anymore, but it is really cool to be able to pick up a shawl at this point in my knitting career and learn something from it, because I have learned things from this shawl. So I really think that it's great that I can have a knit along as an experienced knitter on a pattern that is less complicated, but still learn things from it. So that's really neat. And that's really cool, because I wouldn't have thought about you had to do that on the wrong side, the color change, to get the star stitch to have that beautiful pop of color. So yeah, that's really neat. Totally
I remember writing to the tech editor that the changes are going to be on a wrong side. I mean, are you okay with that? She wrote back saying, do it. We'll come up with something.
Excellent. Well, that is very cool. So did you have any more comments you wanted to make? I mean, I certainly don't want to cut you short.
Not right now.
Okay, well, this is definitely going to be a conversation throughout the course of this Zoom. So, we'll definitely chime in back and forth here. And thank you so much, Lana. I really appreciate this. For everybody who doesn't realize, Lana got up at the crack of dawn so that she has the time difference. So, double really appreciating having her here. So I'm also excited to see Carrie, and I gave her 0 warning in advance, but I wonder if Carrie, you'd like to unmute and say hi to everybody.
Hello. I brought lots of goodies to my desk if you want to see them, even though I got put on the spot. Lana was talking about having to relearn her pattern. It took me 5 swatches to get it right. So the first one I did, I have them all and I can show you. I was purling. So it ended up in like garter stitch. Can you see that?
That's really interesting.
Yeah, so it looks cool, but it wasn't right. And then I started to figure it out, but then I wasn't slipping I wasn't passing the stitch over properly. So that one, it started, I wasn't garter stitching anymore, but I wasn't slipping the stitch right either. I think I was starting on the wrong row, but eventually I got it and I got the star stitch, but I wasn't getting it to do the lattice properly. This one came up straight instead of offsetting. And I figured out in the swatch that it was gonna take a certain number of stitches and I couldn't start the row the same way, but I still made another one wrong. Didn't stack up. But that has a really cool effect too, of the almost like 2 triangles, half and half.
Yeah, I really like that one.
Yeah, but then this one I got it, and I was able to do all 3 of the colors that are in the shawl. And I got the lattice effect where it has all it's easier to see if you were looking through it, but it has that nice grid work of the yarn overs and holes. And I have the finished one that we photographed for the KAL here. I think it's bigger than people might realize. It's really good size. And my favorite way to wear it is kind of like a handkerchief or a kerchief up front.
Oh yeah, I love styling triangular shawls like that. They're just so cozy and warm. And then if you need to, shall we say, with my personal climate zone issue, ventilate a bit, you can adjust it.
Yeah, I'm in Rochester, New York. So depending on the weather, I might, I have been known to wear them over my head and wrapping around because it is freezing here for most of the winter. So lots of fun ways to wear it.
Yeah, I love that. I will admit, again, all the shawls that I've ever made and worn, it didn't occur to me to do that, which I really should. It snowed here just about 2 or 3 days ago. So you never know what you're going to get at this kind of season. So that's one of the things I love about a shawl like this is they're so flexible.
Yeah. Really.
Kerry, can I say something?
Yeah.
You have to send me the pictures of all those swatches.
Okay.
Some of them look so promising.
They do. They are really fun. I mean, they're not quite right, but they're fun. They're interesting. The texture on the ones with the garter is really very interesting to me.
Yes.
This is how new stitches are born.
Yep, for sure.
Absolutely.
I'll send you lots of close-up photos and you can figure out what.
Yeah, I have dibs on that triangle one. That's really
Oh,
cool.
okay.
Absolutely, yes, that is the best.
Maybe I should finish what I owe you right now anyway. And, you know, then think about that.
Yes, you can't tell yet. We're working
No,
on more things behind this.
We'll just drive the audience nuts wondering what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Carrie, so much. And do feel free to weigh in at any time during the rest of this Zoom call, because you are a fountain of knowledge. And like I say, you are so much appreciated. One of the things that I'll point out to the people who are in the Zoom meeting tonight is, if you aren't aware of it, you can go to the Interweave Plus forum, and you don't have to pay for a membership. If you just sign up for the Interweave login, you can go to the forums there and participate in the KAL in the chat. And Carrie's always monitoring that. And my God, that woman is on all the time. So she is super helpful in there. Well, it looks like you're on there all the time. Anyway, she's super helpful. And if you need to get help, you know, outside of something that Lana or I can answer, Carrie is always there, and she has knit the shawl, so she knows all. And it's also a great forum to go and just chat with people. It's a really positive, upbeat place, and I've been really enjoying reading it myself. I will admit that I have not actually dipped my toe in and posted a comment yet, but this too shall come. It's just been a very busy week. We have exciting things that are going on here too that are super secret, but might involve studio changes. So there's another teaser for people. Anyway, at this point in time, I thought what I'd do is just a little bit of reviewing of some basic techniques. Now, Interweave has some fantastic videos that are really detailed, but some of us are not so great at watching videos and we want a live presentation. So I had some requests for me to do that. So I've got some swatches prepared here for my special little teeny camera, which is probably going to be blurry until I remember which button to press to zoom it. And ooh, look at that. So I just wanted to go over a few tips for those of you who are just starting right now. One of the things that I'm going to pass along is a sneaky little trick that my mom taught me about 50 years ago. And that's when you're starting off with a single stitch. So when you start a project with a single stitch, sometimes what will happen is you get a big loose loop at the bottom when you do your first knit stitches into that. So she taught me to make a slip knot for my first stitch, but instead of doing it so that the loose part that you're pulling through that'll be able to adjust the slip knot being the long tail that's attached to the ball of yarn, turn it around and make your slip knot by folding over the top and making a loop. You're sort of in focus there, little slip knot. Let's get you up closer. Go camera. Oh, I think I heard its brain. Okay, that's not too bad. So you're making a loop and then you're folding it over the string that you are trying to make into a slip knot and pulling it through. If you do this with your short tail facing to the right when you're making your slip knot, that's the one that you pull on to tighten your stitch. And the sneakiness about this is that when you go to start your shawl, getting some lovely pink needles here to demonstrate with, untangling all the yarn, which suddenly has decided to tangle. So we're going to put our loop on our needle, getting the needle under the camera. Why I need to narrate this, no one will know. So you do your knit one, yarn over, and then knit one into your loop, and you'll have this baggy loop at the bottom. And this really bugged me. So when you make that slip knot in the other direction, you can just pull on that slip knot and snug your stitch up. So this is just a sneaky little trick that Mom taught me.
Oh my God, this is so brilliant. It's such a winner.
Right? So she'd been knitting all her life, and she actually started off when she was a little girl like me, and they lived on the prairies and they supported themselves by a combination of farming and knitting. So this was one of her little tricks, was just to make that slip knot in the other direction. It took me a lot to remember that little trick, but it just makes it so nice and tidy. So I just wanted to show you that little tip because I really like it, and it means that you'll have this beautiful, perfect triangle there without a big floppy loop on the bottom. Because trying to like somehow weave the end in to fill the loop later on is just an exercise in, oh, that's so annoying. And then from here, you just go on and you knit your shawl as normal, and you've got your working yarn attached properly, and it's very easy to weave the end in later. So it's just a sneaky little tip that Mom taught me all those years ago that will help you to just have a nice tidy bottom on your shawl. Because let's face it, some of us just really love that perfect triangle V there. So that's one of the little tips that I wanted to show you. The next was that I prepared a swatch here, which is the start of the shawl, and I've done this in bulky yarn. And I wanted to remind everyone of what Lana was saying is that you start off with the next chart, with the first chart rather, and you're not going to be working on the right side rows, you're going to be working on the wrong side rows. So if you look at this from the right side, you can see my yarn is off on the left, and that tells me I have to turn the work over to knit my next row, sliding it along the needle because I moved it for the previous demonstration. And this is where I'm going to change to my next color of yarn. So when we go to knit this chart, you're beginning on a wrong side row, and let's put this chart under here. Ooh, there it is. And let's get it in here. So there's your star stitch chart. So you begin here, and for those who are not as familiar with charts, what this says is 1WS. And what that means is that this is row 1. You're on the wrong side row, and there is a little visual cue on this chart that tells you what direction to follow the stitches on the chart. So with the 1 being on this side, that means you're going to knit this way. You're going to knit from left to right. And knitting from left to right on a chart is the normal way that you would work a wrong side row. When you get to the right side, your number is there. If you've looked at other charts, you might see them done differently so that the 1 will be on the right and the 2 is on the left. But the numbers on charts are always a cue as to what side that you're going to use to read the chart. So this is something that I did have some people asking me about, was how to read the chart, because it's not done in the way that you would see other charts. You will see charts like this and you will see charts the other way. So no matter what chart you're knitting, you will always see this convention of the numbers appear on the side that you are going to start reading from. So in this case, on the first row, and let's get this up even closer, we start off here and we're going to knit 2 stitches, we're going to purl some stitches, and we're going to knit 2 stitches. The next thing you'll notice on here is that there's a red border, and that marks the repeat, so that you can use this chart over and over, and you will, just as your number of stitches increases throughout the course of working the first repeat of the chart, you're going to get more stitches, so you'll repeat these within the brackets each time that you work this chart. So again, these are instructions for people who are a little less familiar with charts, and I hope that they'll help you in working through that. The key over on this side has been worked by a tech editor who is like, I am going to support you through every stitch and every box on this chart. So some of it is a little repetitive, and for those of us who have done a lot more knitting and aren't used to this, just bear in mind that all it's doing is repeating the instructions for each color of box on the chart. So that made my brain hurt, but I decided it was actually pretty brilliant because it also helps as well, especially for people who are less familiar with charts and want to know, well, what does that dark gray box mean with a circle in it? So it's telling you what color of yarn to use, as well as what you're doing with the yarn. So don't let the key throw you. The key is super helpful, and there was a tech editor who worked really hard on that. So we work a star stitch, and I got to tell you, the Interweave video is brilliant on this, and I love it dearly. But we'll do a little bit here too. We work a star stitch, and it's really simple. So I'm actually going to go to my chart where I have already knit row 1, which was a wrong side row. No, I haven't knit row 1. I'm going to.
She's not there.
Okay, so we're just going to do our 2 knits, and then we're going to purl across. This is where I need some sort of nice little music to play. By the way, this shawl has a 2-stitch garter border, so that's why you're always knitting your edge stitches. That's something to point out too for people who are less familiar. Okay, we've gotten to our second row on the chart, which is our right side row. We're going to start reading our chart from the right side of the chart, and we're going to work 2 knit stitches. Then we're going to do a yarn over. Yes, I am in front of the camera, good. There's our yarn over, and then we're going to get into a single knit stitch and then the star stitch. The star stitch is worked by knitting 3 stitches, and then we're going to pass one of them over the other 2. There's different ways to write this, and in this case, it's been written as knit 3, then pass the 3rd stitch over the first 2 stitches. So Canadian knitters can get thrown by this because we tend to refer to what would be the 3rd stitch here as the 1st stitch. So for Canadian knitters and people who are North American knitters, you might have seen this written a different way. So we knit 3, just like the chart tells us in the key, and then we have to figure out which is the 3rd stitch. In this case, the tech editor has counted from the tip of the needle in 1, 2, 3. So that's the 3rd stitch, the one that we're going to pass over. A North American knitter would think of this as the 1st stitch because it was the 1st stitch knit to complete the star stitch. Regardless, you're going to take that one that was first knit and is third in from the tip of the needle, and you're just going to pass it over the other two and drop it off. That's all there is to the star stitch. So there's a whole bunch of really great advice on that Interweave video about working these, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of a summary here so that if you don't have time to go back and watch the whole video, you get that. Now, when we go to the chart, this has to be followed by a yarn over. And the reason for that is we take one stitch away on our row. So we always have to pair it up with a yarn over somewhere in the row to put the stitch back. So if you're a beginner, we want to end with the same number of stitches that we started in terms of the body in that repeat. And we want to have overall increased one stitch on your right-hand side rows, because then that makes a nice big triangle shape. So there we do our yarn over, and then we go ahead and we knit the rest of the row. Now we're going to come to a color change. So when we're working our color changes, we're doing them on the wrong side of the work. Where's my snazzy end of my green yarn? There's my snazzy green yarn's end. Oh goodness. So here's where we're going to change colors. There are all sorts of fancy ways to deal with your ends when starting a new color in a new yarn, but for honestly, on this one, what I would do myself is I wouldn't worry about trying to catch that end into the stitches a la Stephen West, for example. I would just let it all hang out and just weave the end in when you're done, because then you can avoid messing with your yarn over. So literally all I'm going to do is just start knitting. And again, thank you, Mom. This is how she would have done it all those years ago. Actually, okay, I'm going to tell you a secret. Mom would have knitted this onto the other yarn because Mom didn't have any problem with knots and knitting. She could not care less about them. And like modern knitters are like, ooh. So anyway, I'm just going to knit my row, and later on, I'm going to go back and I'm going to deal with that tail. But right now, I'm just going to let it all hang out. Making sure I'm under our camera. If anyone is curious about the way that I'm knitting, it's actually called flick knitting. And you can see some demonstrations of it on Very Pink Knits. Works really well with circular needles. So now I am on my right side row, and you can just pull your little tail up there. And we're going to work the fourth row of this chart. So we will start off with 2 knit stitches, and every right side row you want to remember to put a yarn over in. Even if you're being like, oh, I don't need to look at the chart, don't forget that yarn over at the start of the row there, or your shawl will not grow. Then we have 3 knit stitches on the chart. Should have been smart enough to have a split screen for this with the chart, but now the next stitch on the chart is a yarn over, and what that will do is help us offset our star stitch. Then we work the star stitch itself. So we're going to knit 3 stitches. Then we have our stitches on our needle, and we're going to count in 3, and we'll pick up that stitch here, stick the point of your needle in, and just gently pull it over and drop it. You haven't lost any stitches in total in your count because you have that yarn over at the start. Then we knit our 2 edge stitches. Now at this point in time, we get to where we're going to change colors. And there's a really easy way to handle that that will cause them to lie really nicely. During each section of the shawl, so during the star stitch section, you're not going to break off your yarns every 2 rows because you will go insane weaving in your ends if you're me. You're just going to carry them up the side of the knitting. And to do that, you're going to take the yarn and bring it up from the front, and you're just going to start knitting. If you're a fan of intarsia, what this does is it actually creates a cross. And so it actually means they're nice and tidy along the edge of your knitting, and they will weave over each other and not get all loose and floppy. Now there's another trick to this. When you are starting off with your next color and you're bringing this up and knitting your first stitch, it's really easy to pull this up tight and then cause your shawl to curve in. So what you're going to do when you knit that first stitch is you're going to hold on to that other stitch there, and you're going to lift this one up to the height of the other needle. You see what I'm doing there? So I'm giving it a bit of slack so that the yarn can stretch up the side of the knitting. So this will give me enough slack at the edge that my strand isn't going to pull my shawl in. If you don't give some sort of little bit of tug on that first stitch, and if you're a tight knitter in particular, you could get a shawl that really has a curve in it. Now that's a cool shape, but it's not what's intended here, and it'll affect the blocking of the shawl. So just pull that needle up to the height of the other one to give yourself a little bit of room there. So the next 2 rows are going to be knit in exactly the same way that you did the other ones. I keep moving my hands out of the shot here. And you're just going to continue through the whole chart like this. So I'm just going to purl, and my little stars are starting to show. And we will get to the other end. By the way, for those who don't like purling, learn to flick knit, because my God, it's fast and easy. I can actually purl faster than I can knit. Yay. So when you look at your shawl and you've changed colors, you can see those stars already forming there. See, aren't they pretty? And so this is what's going to happen. You're going to get those offsetting up through that section. Slip stitches. We need to do a few tips and tricks on slip stitches too.
Carolyn, can I just say something about the star stitch? Could you just hold up what you just made?
Absolutely.
So just a little tip to make life a little easier. So if you notice, every star stitch lines up precisely over the yarn over of the previous row. So that's how you know you got it right.
Exactly. That is a great tip. And I had thought about that and then totally forgotten it. Thank God Lana was here. Yeah, so that's one of the things that you can tell if you're off. And it's really helpful whenever you're working a lace pattern, if you can find something that will allow you to do what's called reading your knitting. So Lana has given us a perfect way to read our knitting. If that yarn over isn't straddling, if they aren't right in the middle there, then that'll tell you that you've gone somewhere sideways. So when I was knitting my shawl, which I have put away so carefully that I couldn't bring it out to show anybody, that was actually something that I was looking for, was to make sure that those were perfectly offset. So again, it's a really nice version of star stitch because some of them don't do that as well. So on our slip stitches, there's two different ways that you can slip yarn. And one of them is with your yarn in the back and one is with your yarn in the front. And you need to pay attention. Whoops, that's the wrong end. My God, all my hair's falling out too. Goodness gracious. Okay, so you need to pay attention on this chart as to whether you are holding the yarn in the front when you do a slip stitch and whether you're holding the yarn in the back. And so when you look at the chart, it'll say slip one purlwise. So what does that mean? Well, let's just do a little bit of demonstrating with what that is. Just gonna knit part way out. This is like not a shawl here now. This is just a nice long set of stitches so I can demonstrate. To slip purlwise means that you are going to put your needle into the next stitch and move it to the right hand needle. So you're moving from the left hand to the right hand, and you're going to do it as if you were about to purl that stitch. So the two needle tips point in opposite directions. If you ever have a pattern that tells you that you're going to slip one knitwise, then it goes the other way and your needles would point in the same direction, and it's as if you were going to make a knit stitch. So this is a little trick that I remind myself on if I'm trying to remember what's knitwise and purlwise. Purlwise is always they're going away from each other. Knitwise is that they're heading off into the sunset for happiness. So we're slipping that stitch purlwise. What does WYB on right side mean? So on the right side of your work, you're going to slip the stitch and you'll leave your yarn in the back of the knitting. So when I go to knit my next stitch, that yarn is making a little loop on the back of the knitting. You see that there? If I was told, and if I'm on a wrong side row, that I'm going to slip a stitch knitwise, then I would slip, no, sorry, not knitwise, with the yarn in front. So that's WYF. Then you're going to move your yarn to the front and slip your stitch. And then if you have to knit the next one, you can put it back in the back. Or if you're going to purl, you can just go ahead and purl. And a little trick to keep these from pulling in too much is to just spread your stitches out on your right hand needle to the distance apart that they would be if you had taken the knitting off your needle. So that's pretty much all the tips that I need to give you here, because this is such a nice, clean, well-written pattern that there's not a lot going on in terms of terrible complexity. So at this point in time, what we can do is we can have everybody unmute, and it's a chance to share your shawls and ask questions and, you know, just get to know the rest of the staff. And then there's one secret thing that we couldn't resist doing, which we didn't advertise in advance, but we have to do a giveaway. I mean, come on. If it's ancient arts, we've got to do a giveaway. So we're going to do a random giveaway of a set of rainbow knit blockers to some lucky person who is in the meeting right now. So our wonderful Heather behind the scenes will draw the name. And then what you're going to do is you are going to contact us at sales@ancientartsfiber.com so that you can claim your prize. All right, Heather, go for it.
All right. Meredith is our winner.
Congratulations, Meredith. Is there a last name on the screen?
No.
Okay. So if you can pop that email address into the chat for Meredith, she's going to email, and then we will get her information to send out her prize. So we do it this way because I just don't want everybody giving out their personal information because you never know. It's always safer not to do that sort of thing. So at this point in time, feel free, guys, to unmute and just ask any questions. And hopefully I wasn't too incomprehensible when I was giving you your tips and tricks.
Hi, I have a question. This is Monica. I'm in Maynard, Massachusetts. Can you address the note about beginning at row 1 and 7 on the slip stitch chart? It talks about wrapping, twisting it once around the working yarn, and it wasn't clear to me what that meant.
I know what that's about.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
So there is a point when you're doing the color shifting between sections that at the end of section 1, before you start section 2, and you're switching your main color and your contrast color, where you'll actually carry your main color, I believe it is, up 4 rows instead of up 2 rows. And it's just telling you to twist
Got
it.
it. I understand now. So you don't have a big long loop. I understand. Thank you. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you, Monica. That is a great question. And for those who weren't sure what that was, because you might not have got there, sometimes when you're carrying yarn up the side of a shawl, instead of 2 rows, you might carry it up 4. So in order to not have a big loose loop, let's put this back where you guys can see it. In order not to have a big loose loop on the side, if you just twist the 2 yarns together at that edge and then keep on knitting, you're not going to get a loose loop on the side. So that's what we were talking about there. So this one, you see how it lies nice and flat. But if I had to carry it 4 stitches, I could get a boing. So that's where you just twist them together on the edge. Okay, if you can unspotlight that, Dan, that would be fantastic. So who else would like to ask a question?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay. Is it possible the shawl that we saw that was finished, could we see it again? I just want to see the edge of it where we twist the yarn, you know, when we change the colors, because we're a group of 5 people. We're from Quebec. We're a group of 5 people I'm representing because not many people speak English. And we just find that it looks kind of funny. I want to see yours, or the one that we saw before, what it looks like on the side. So, you know, on the other side, you see the nice garter stitch, but where you twist the yarn, it doesn't have the same look. It doesn't look clean and neat.
Dan, if you can spotlight Carrie. Perfect.
Okay. Can you see my edge here?
Yeah. Okay. Can you put it in the front so I can see the front of it?
This is the front. So
Okay.
that twisting is along the edge.
Okay.
And
So it's
along
very
the edge.
loose. Okay. So
It's
we're
not-
all,
Yeah.
the 5 of us are having a hard time getting that nice clean edge. So I've taken it, I've been knitting for 40 years as well, right? And I've been taking it apart. I even tried switching the color on the second stitch. So I figured the first one's going to be nice, and you know, the switch of the color is going to be done on the inside, but that also doesn't look good.
So the way that I did mine was each new row, I would take the color I was done with and move it off to the side, to the right. And then I would bring the next color up and under.
Over. Oh, under. You're doing it under.
Yeah, I was doing it under. And then I
And you
would
were-
start to knit. So that was kind of the strand I was no longer using was kind of just off and out. And then when I got back again, I brought the new one under. It's just
always under. So you've got
Yeah.
your stitch and you go under. And what you were showing before was over.
It was over, but in the end, when I work it, it actually does cross. So you know what we can do is I'll do a little video for you and post it on social
Oh, that
media.
would be great.
Yeah, because it is almost like intarsia. And with intarsia, you always bring the yarn that you're starting with under the other one. So by lifting it up in the front and then I brought it around to the back, then that actually did exactly the same thing. And it will look just like Carrie's. So Carrie's is really nice and clean, and it just gives you
Yes,
that
it
sort
is.
yeah, single line checkerboard almost.
yeah.
That's how I do it too. I do it just like Kerry does. It goes under. That really
Yeah.
gives a neat edge. But I think the important thing is here to give a little slack as you're carrying the yarn up. So that will give you a stretch when you're done. If you
Okay.
pull the yarn tight, then especially with shawls, they don't work like garments. So if you
Okay.
don't give a little slack, then it will pull at the edges and the lace will bloom in the center. And that probably gives you that doesn't give you the look you're going for.
Because
Mhm.
the 5 of us were all having the same issue. So we said, we're going to stop everything, listen tonight, question, and then start again. So after this, I'm going to send everybody a chat. Because it's just a different technique, because I'm also knitting a Guernsey shawl. And that's completely the opposite. Everything's got to be super, super tight. Right? So it's
And I do
okay.
have to apologize because my using the word front probably threw you. And of course, I'm saying front because I'm working on the wrong side, but what I'm actually doing is I want the yarns to cross under. So like I say, I can do a little wee video and put it on there and make a great reel, and I would enjoy doing that. I'll just go up a few stitches and, you know, show it to you. I can do a little narrow column. But
And where will we find this video?
we'll put it on our social media so that you can find it. If you go to Instagram or Facebook, we'll put it in the Facebook too,
No,
and then that'll give you that.
Okay, will you put it in the blog? What happens to people that are not on Facebook or Instagram?
Yeah, that's a good question.
like me, obviously.
That's a good idea. Did you want to do an official Interweave one, Carrie? Or
We
would you like
we
me
talk
to-
about managing the yarns in the Star Stitch video, and Allison shows that method of going from under and over. So it is there. I don't know if you saw the video on YouTube for how to work Star Stitch and manage the yarns.
I'll have to go check.
Let me grab a link for you. One sec. I'll put the link in the chat.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've watched that video several times and I forgot about that part being in there, but it's probably because it's been a couple of days. So. And I believe Carrie has put the links for the videos into the Interweave Plus forum as well. So you'll be able to find it there.
Okay, I'll find it there. If it's there, I'll find it there. I will.
Right now, Carrie's going to put them in the chat, and what you can do is you can click on it and it won't end your Zoom session, but it will open that window up for you and you can go back to it later. The other thing that I will do is Interweave has an awful lot of helpful videos. And so I'll just go to YouTube and I'll go to the Interweave channel and just, you know, if you scroll down a few videos, it's there. So it's pretty easy to find.
Okay. So that's the only thing, because the pattern is beautiful. The colors are fabulous. It's really, really a beautiful project, but we just got stuck on the edge and that was it. I don't think I've ever undone something so many times, and I'm trying and I'm just, I don't know, there's just a little something that we're not doing right. Anyway,
Have you tried it on a swatch? Have you tried it on a swatch with that garter edge? Because that garter stitch is going to grow too. And you need that
I've tried
slack.
everything. I've tried everything.
Okay.
So that's why when I was doing the little demo, remember I pulled my needle up and that first loop looked really loose, but that gives you the slack that you need for the edge, because when you go to block it, you're going to need that first loop being loose, because then all of that goes into the edge of the shawl and it tightens up really nicely. So that's, again, a little trick that I just wanted to emphasize because it can be kind of confusing. How much slack do I do? The other thing I will point out is that if you're using a really elastic yarn, and the yarn used for the KAL is elastic, it's merino, and so it's really bouncy, erring on the side of discretion, as my mother would have said, and giving it a little bit more slack yet is a good idea, because merino, when it gets washed and blocked, it likes to go, ooh, I'm going to get all fluffy, and it spreads out sideways and pulls in that way. So giving that lots of slack on the edge means you'll have an edge like Carrie's that's nice and elastic.
Okay. Beautiful yarn.
Well, thank you. It is Canadian made in Quebec.
That's why we registered. We said, oh, it's in Quebec. we were all excited.
Excellent. Alrighty, well, since there are people putting their hands up, which is really helpful, Dan, would you like to spotlight the next person that you see with their hand up and just let us know who it is that you were spotlighting? Okay, so it looks like Steph Scott, go for it.
Yes, and actually I'm next because my question's about the edge also. But before I do that, I want to thank Carolyn and Wendy for the color suggestions. When I wound the yarn, I'm like, oh no, this is not going to work. But when I started knitting, it's like, I love it.
Well, it's beautiful.
Yeah. The question I have is on the edging also. I'm not having problems with how it's looking, but it seems to be curling in where the star stitch is. Is that because of the way the star stitch is, or am I doing it too tight?
That's really a natural thing that's going to happen for a lot of knitters at this point in the shawl process, because there's a certain way that yarn moves in stitches. And one of the reasons that we put a garter stitch border on there is that you have, I can get into like a huge amount of technical stuff. Garter stitch stabilizes the edges of shawls and doesn't allow it to roll because of the way that yarn is used in the shape of the stitch itself. When you block this, it's going to straighten out a lot. Right now, the yarn hasn't actually settled into its final position. So it's got a lot of elasticity being merino. And so it's rolling a little bit. But when you block it, it should lie much more flat. So garter stitch edges are normally done with at least 2 stitches, and you'll get them anywhere up to and including 6 or 7. And it's just to flatten that edge out, because you're using the same amount of yarn in a knit stitch all the time. But a knit and a purl are constructed a little differently, and it will put different torque on the stitches and have a different surface area. So if you do just stocking stitch on an edge, it will roll because of the way that the forces are due to the yarn. So yeah, long story short, it'll block out. It'll be great. Looks wonderful.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
Next, I've got Kelly.
Oh, hi. So I have 2 questions. I also have ADD. Sorry about that. Timeline. Do you have kind of an idea of like where we should be like how much we should progress each week to be able to finish in a month? Just because I know at the beginning it's deceptive. You're like, oh, look, I'm making so much progress. And then you get to the end and it's lots of stitches. And so I just didn't know if whoever did the sample could tell us, like about what section we need to get to stay on track.
So another little behind the scenes reveal. I raced through the sample and did it in 10 days. Because we wanted fresh photos and we were on a timeline. Every morning and every evening, I was just zipping through it. So I did it in 10 days. I do not recommend anybody trying to go that fast unless you have a lot of spare time and it brings you joy. But I would say, when I was doing it, I was setting goals like by the end of the weekend, I want to be through section 2 and that kind of thing. So get an idea for how long it's taking you to do particular chunks and then do what works for you. It really is not a race. No one's required to finish by April 30th. You're entered in the Interweave giveaway, no matter whether you finish or not. So just enjoy the process.
Okay, and my second question is, was it Caroline that was speaking at the beginning? Is that your name?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. Can you just give a little idea of what the difference between flicking and like English knitting or throwing? Like,
Oh, yeah.
the difference between the two? I'm curious about that.
Under the camera. So flick knitting is something that actually got a name long after I started doing it. And I was really fascinated to find out that it really did get a name. And what it is it's an adaptation of lever knitting for me. So I'm going to put my hand under the camera, and it works really, really well with interchangeable needles. It's because what happens with it is that in lever knitting, you have a needle that's fixed in place. It tends to sit like this, and then you're manipulating the stitches along the other needle in your left hand, and you're moving the needle back and forth like a lever, pushing them down on the right needle. So I used to have great big long straight needles, and I would stick them in the couch or in a belt or in the armhole of my shirt, and then I'd go ahead and I'd lever knit. But that's kind of awkward, and it means you need a couch if you're using couch cushions, and it's kind of hard to take your knitting with you. So I got into interchangeable needles, and I really like them, and my method modified. So when I put a needle in a stitch now, I insert the tip, and I do tend to hold my needles like this, and I insert the needle into the tip of the next stitch. And then to make the stitch, you see how the yarn is running over my forefinger. A thrower will take that, and they might let go of the needle entirely and wrap it, or they might move their hand forward. What I'm doing is a total cheat. And I actually push my needle forward, and then you see how it just goes and grabs the yarn. So it's like a combination of continental knitting, and it's super fast. But part of the reason why I knit with it is that I've developed arthritis, and this is a really easy on your hands way to knit. And it's very fast. So it's almost as fast when you really get going as true lever knitting is, because you're still able to manipulate the stitches on the left-hand needle and just feed them off. So that needle pushes forward, and there's almost no movement in my hand. The other thing is that my hands are holding really light. So I'm barely touching this, and I'm barely doing anything with the left. It just sits on my little finger. So it's kind of fun because you're flicking that needle forward, the base of it. You can do this with straight needles, but it works best with interchangeables. And you can see it's really fast. If you are purling, it's super fast too, because again, you're flicking forward and catching the yarn, and there's absolutely no effort to it. The other nifty thing is if you're one of those people who has a different tension between purling and knitting, flick knitting will get rid of that. So I have the exact same tension on both of them, which is really nifty and kind of handy. And if you don't like purling, this will solve it, because there's not much motion there and your tension is exactly the same. You just moved your yarn from one side of the needle to the other. So that's flick knitting. Very Pink Knits did do a couple of videos about this. So there is a resource online that you can go and look at it. And she does a really good analysis too. But I've been knitting like this probably for 30 years, and I had no name for it until I saw that and was like, oh, it's got a name. That's cool. It's interesting because even in my lifetime, it didn't used to be called English knitting at all. So, you know, names for knitting change, but as the knitting tools themselves evolve, different styles of knitting can come up. So I hope that answered your question.
It did. Thank you. I've been a thrower my whole life, so it was kind of interesting to see that difference. I might have to play with that or make sure my tension doesn't change, you know, with the different technique. So
yeah, there's different ways to tension your yarn too. And once I stopped doing, because I was a thrower, continental knitting breaks my brain. I can only do it when I'm weaving an ending on a sock, which isn't very helpful. So I did start tensioning my yarn differently, and you can see I actually run it through my fingers. And I actually got the idea for that from a tool that you use to tension yarn when you're winding a warp for weaving. As my hands started getting a little more old and my little finger didn't like grabbing the yarn and tensioning it, which is what I was doing, now I'll often just wrap it around my little finger and put it through my hand like that, because then my hand can just stay loose. So for arthritic hands, this is really great because there's no tension on your fingers and you're not gripping anything tightly. So I definitely recommend it if you're having some issues with sore hands. The other nice thing about this is that because it's really ergonomic, because you're going to hold your wrists straight as well while you do this, no crooked wrists, you can knit for 8 hours at a time and not get tired, which will then mean your husband is now almost a knitting widower. All right, if you want to go on to the next person, Dan, that would be great.
Hi.
I've got Nancy next.
Hi. I have a question about the slip stitch section. I couldn't tell from the photographs because it wasn't as close up, but between rows 3 and 4, that section, and then 9 and 10, the stitch is offset, if you know what I mean. The little V stitch is offset, and I just wanted to confirm that. Hello.
So is looking at her shawl.
I forgot I muted myself. I was looking for one of the high contrast sections so that I could put it up close for you. They are offset by 1 stitch.
Right.
Can you see that?
Right. Great. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you, Carrie. My shawl is somewhere lurking upstairs, and I was like, I seem to recall that being correct, but it's upstairs because I'm silly.
No worries. I was looking at the yarns you're using for your swatching, Caroline, and I want to call yours a moss agate, where mine is a crazy lace agate with the pinks and blues. Your color palette is moss agate, just so you know.
You'll be amused to hear that one of them is called Lichen in My Crevices. The inspiration is actually, we would go in the spring, my husband and I, each year to the same place in Bow Valley Provincial Park and go for a nice little hike because there was enough of it thawed that you could walk there before the rest of the mountains would be thawed out, because of course there'd be 6 feet of snow. But I would be out of shape for hiking, and you'd be going over these areas that would have all these rocks with these lichens, and I'd be like, oh man, this is work. And of course he'd be dancing up them like he's a mountain goat and driving me nuts. So that's where Lichen in My Crevices came from. But I agree, it does look very much like a moss agate. And the other color is a tree inspired color, and these were both chosen by one of our production people who is going to make off with this yarn tomorrow and crochet it into some lovely hats. All righty, Dan, if you'd like to go to the next person with a question.
Hi, I'm
Catherine here.
Kathy from Spokane, and I love this pattern. I couldn't wait to get started, so I couldn't wait for my yarn, so I started with some stash. So now I have 2 shawls going. And it was very, very nice to see all the ways of doing it incorrectly, because I did them all. But it looks wonderful. I really love this pattern.
Yeah, it totally clicked for
I'd
me
like-
too. All my favorite things, texture stitches and slip stitches. And I'm like, could it get any better?
Yep, yep.
Well, thank
So
you so
glad
much.
you're enjoying it.
Thanks.
All righty, we have a few more people with questions. So Dan, do you want to go to the next person?
Patty Richardson of Oregon.
Hi, everyone. Quick question. Could you show your trick to get the beginning single stitch started again with the slip
Absolutely.
knot? I tried it and mine looks like an unholy mess.
Yeah, it's an evil little thing to do at first, because I normally, like for years and years and years, I have made slip knots where the tail goes in my left hand, and I make the knot by folding a loop over. So the left hand folds over the right, and then you flip it towards yourself and you pull the string up in the middle. But if you do that, you can only tighten the loop from the right, from the working yarn. And the problem with that is that once you've started knitting with that yarn, you really can't tighten it up easily. And that annoyed my precise soul. So I had to figure out how to do it differently. And in this case, I went back to what Mom taught me back when I was a youngin'. And she said, turn it around so that the tail is in your right hand. And then you're going to make your loop by folding the left over the right, just like you normally would. Come on, camera, you can do it. There we go. And then you flip the loop towards you and over that tail in the right hand, and you just pull that through. Now, when you do that, the loop is tightened by that tail end, so you can snug it up to wherever you need it to be without affecting the stitches that you've just knit into that loop. So would you like me to repeat that? Come on, camera, you can focus.
No, I'm madly taking notes and drawings, so I think I have it now.
Okay, so tail in right hand, working yarn in left hand. Wow, I really dyed my fingernails. Make a loop from left to right. So you're folding your yarn over. And then you're going to flip the loop over onto the tail end in your right hand, or your working yarn if you were doing it the other way. And then you're going to pull that through the loop that you made, and there's your slip knot. And in this case, I have done the opposite of what I normally do, and I've put the tail end in my right hand because I want to be able to snug the loop and never have it move again.
Okay. Thank you.
You are so welcome. So Dan, there's somebody in the chat who is asking to be added to the question queue. So if you can just make sure at some point in time to find that person and spotlight. I think we had 1 or 2 more hands.
Yeah, I think next I'm going to spotlight Linda. Oh, Linda, did you have more questions?
Yes, one more question. The pink needles that you were using, what are they?
So the reason why that evil cackle is that I am completely addicted to knitting needles. I will admit this to
Same
everybody.
here. Same
And
here.
I must have all the things. So those, I'm gonna get this to show you.
They caught my interest.
I literally had to start selling knitting needles to feed my habit, and that's what these are.
Oh, they're like, but they're plastic. The finish is plastic.
No. So here's
No?
the thing. The material that your needles are made out of affects the size of your stitches.
Yeah.
So it will actually change your gauge. And I needed a really good excuse to be buying all these needles. And I actually got one off of these because Likey makes the needles in 2 different woods. So the driftwood, indigo, amber series are made with one wood, not quite sure what it is because they call it driftwood. The pink ones though, the blush needles are made with birch and they actually grab the yarn differently. So I found with a sweater that I'm making, I had to use the pink needles in order to get the row gauge that I needed. I was using the blue indigo needles. My row gauge was off by like 6 rows and 4 rows, which is pretty bad. But when I moved the birch needles to try a swatch, I was bang on. So sometimes having multiple materials for your needles actually is not just the fact that you're addicted to knitting needles, it's highly functional. But those are the black ones and they're made out of birch. The other Likey ones are made out of a different wood and they are slipperier. The birch ones grab your yarn more. Plus they're pretty.
Are the tips fairly pointy? I know the birch ones, the driftwood ones, sorry, they're very round at the end. So when you're knitting lace, it's very difficult to.
Yeah.
But what you had, they seem to be very pointy.
I have one under the little camera there. It doesn't seem to really want to focus very well on it.
Yeah, no,
I would
see
say
them.
they're basically about the same as the other Likey tips. They're not as sharp as something like a delightful Chaiogoo.
Okay.
And I find the Lantern Moon ebony needles can also be just a teeny bit more pointy. These have allowed me to work lace stitches, but definitely if I'm doing a finer lace, I would not be using either of the Likey needles. And this again
Okay.
gives me a really good excuse to own more needles. So yeah, they're pretty decent.
I'm the same.
Yeah, pretty decent, but not 100% perfect for lace. For lace, I would do more of the Chaiogoo needle because they are deliberately designed for something that's going to get in there without snagging your yarn. So just a little plug for Chaiogoo. I own both those and Haya Haya. And Haya Haya is another metal needle. Very nice, absolutely beautiful cases. But my God, some of them are so sharp that you can really hurt yourself. And I find that depending on the type of yarn, they're too sharp and they start to tear the yarn, whereas the Chaiogoo are just that tiny bit more rounded. So they're really sharp, but they've never torn yarn on me, whereas the Haya Haya have. So, you know, again, I was pretty excited to partner up with my favorite steel needle because they are so really nice. And I will mention, just for those who are curious, Addie also makes a really good needle. I love their Flexi Flips, but I'm the kind of person who has really acidic skin and their metal needles don't work for me, whereas the Chaiogoo do. My hands will literally eat Addie Turbo needles, even the nickel coated ones. So the Chaiogoo steel work really well. I have used some of those since I first got them years ago and there's no wear, which is really nice.
I find that Chaiogoo, their cable is nice and flexible compared to a lot of the other interchangeable needles. I find. Personally, I find
everybody is copying their cables now. So Likey has come out with similar cables. There's the Mindful collection has come out with similar cables.
Yeah.
And Chaiogoo is actually doing something really exciting, which is they are bringing out their lovely cables, but they're making them swivel so that they rotate in the end. Now, this Likey one for the blush rotates as well. And you can't see it, but maybe I'll get the tip there. It goes round and round. You see how it's going?
Okay.
That is a super nice feature when you've got a really long cable. So Chaiogoo has those coming out and I of course immediately pre-ordered them because we need them for the good of the people. I also will say that they're coming out with something that's really evil, which is an amazing set of blackwood with metal tips on them.
Oh. Yeah. I think I might have hinted that in the newsletter coming out to the KAL this weekend.
Somebody may have pre-ordered those as well and we'll test them for the good of all you knitters so that she can report back.
Have you tried the little ones?
Yes.
The shorties.
Mm-hmm. The shorties are really handy too. And I like the different fact that you can get multiple Like you can get 2-inch, but you can also get 3-inch. And so for me, I have really big hands. When I'm knitting things like socks with them, I can put the 3-inch tip on the side that I need it so that I can then have enough room to put my hand on it. There's some, again, like Addie makes a lovely 9-inch needle for making socks, but my hands are so big, I actually can't work them. So yeah. Okay, Heather's making me admit that I have a lot of other needles. So I might admit to having zings, and I might admit to having gingers, and the list kind of goes on for knitting needles.
What was the first interchangeable needle? Denise, I think.
Those are actually go back further than you would expect. And I think it's Carol Solkowski who wrote some really interesting articles about them. So they have appeared in a number of places, this history of interchangeable and circular needles. But I was shocked. I didn't realize they were as old as they are, because I just assumed they came out at some point in the 80s. And it's like, no, it goes back to the century.
Those were my very, very first that I ever purchased, the Denise interchangeable. And they're good for, depending on, again, like you say, depending on the project, on the yarn, different needles are used.
Yep.
You know, dark, light, metal, it depends.
And it's just so helpful to be able to change your gauge subtly. And it is an excuse for having more of them. I'll also tell you an evil secret, which is that a lot of these, except for the Chaiogoo, a lot of the cables and tips are interchangeable. So you can kind of like get the best of both worlds there in terms of cables. So you can buy a nice swivel cable for the pink needles, and you can certainly put them on the other tips that company produces, and possibly some others, but I wasn't never the place and didn't admit it. So Dan, there was somebody in the chat who wanted to be spotlighted, and as long as I have answered all of Linda's questions, we can move to that person too.
I've got Julianne here.
That's me. I have a question because I think I made a mistake with my color choices in this section, and I think I should have used the white as color 1 and then the pink as color 2. Because it doesn't look like everybody else's. Everybody else's kind of comes up and has a pale part in here.
One of the things that you can do, so Carrie is going to give you some thoughts on that, but I'm just going to say something in advance because I'll forget otherwise, in that sometimes you can really make your shawl unique and gorgeous just by flipping colors around. So we did a KAL recently for the Roman Villa shawl, and we had some people who had color choices they weren't 100% sure of in one section. So what we did was we had them flip the colors in that section when it repeated again later in the shawl, and it gave it a lot of depth and richness without making them rip back. So you could change up your color choices moving forward without having to go back to it.
Will that affect my yarn usage at all? Or it won't, right?
At this point in the shawl, I don't think it's going to make a big difference.
I'm not really that far into it. I just...
One of the things you can do is you can say, oh, Ancient Arts lady, you told me to do this and you screwed me up on my yarn amount. And then the Ancient Arts lady will feel super bad and she'll send colors.
But I kind of like it because it doesn't have that stark difference. It's kind of like almost a more subtle progression. It doesn't have like that white kind of stripe. So I might just leave it. Because then
I think it's really beautiful.
Then it's an excuse to make another one, right?
I think it's really beautiful. I did have the most leftover of the softer side of linen color when I knit mine. The one that I had the least bit left of was the blue, the Islands in the Sea. So I did have I wish I had the scraps on my desk, but I don't. They're over in my jar. But there is enough left over that I wouldn't be too worried that you're going to run out.
So
but
I should
blame Caroline if you
continue to make the same mistake then through the whole thing,
just
right?
Yep, it's not a mistake. It is a design element.
Exactly. It's a color choice.
But I knew what it looked like because it's the same as the sample, and I don't know why I just continued on. Like, I'm so smart. Anyway.
Well, I agree with Carrie. I think it actually is really lovely, and I think it allows you to do some design elements and, you know, to kind of personalize it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Right.
I will freely admit that I often will get the same colors as a project is made in, but then I will start messing around with them just to have some fun with it and make it that little bit personal.
I'm really hoping someone does an entirely scrappy one where all 6 sections are a different 2-color palette. I think that would be beautiful.
I was thinking the same thing. I'm waiting for that.
I did find one on social media on the hashtag this afternoon, and I thought it has a strong suspicious look that they might be doing that. So I had to read it because there's some really pretty ones showing up there, and it was really, really neat.
Oh, cool.
Oh, somebody's saying they're using 6-color. Kelly. Oh, I'm excited to see that as it goes. Okay, now I want to do that.
I don't know, Caroline, do you have any scraps? Like, do you have any, you know, leftover yarn anywhere? I don't.
The worst part is not really know.
No.
I
She's
tend
sitting
to
in front of a whole bunch of bins. Of
Yeah,
the
there's
mini
that.
behind her.
I'm really bad about saving my leftover yarn. I tend to give it away to whoever isn't moving fast enough because I'm like, I am now done. I will never need it again. And then I always regret this. And you would think that given how long I've been knitting, I would learn better, but no.
I save all my leftovers for Christmas ornaments.
That's smart.
It's usually just enough to do an ornament.
And I have been not as bad about giving it all away once I discovered doing stripy ankle socks. So yeah, I've gotten kind of hooked on making those. I think Kelly's getting her color choices there. Okay, that's cool.
Hi, so that's lightsaber of yours. And
Look
it's,
at that.
I met Stephen West, and I started earlier because I've never read a chart. So I had to take the chart, I wrote it out, I worked with it, and then I typed it out. So I have it written. But yeah, so I met Stephen West and I liked it, lightsaber, and then I just found a black.
Thank you for not making
so
that
cool.
black. That is stunning. I am so impressed.
Thanks, I'm excited.
That's lovely.
It really is. Well, we've gone past our time. It has been a huge amount of fun, but I don't want to keep people if they don't want to stay. So I also want to make sure to extend a sincere thanks to Lana and Carrie for having joined us tonight, because you guys made all the difference to this particular event. And I'm really looking forward to doing this again in 2 weeks and seeing your progress and, you know, reveling in this KAL. So anybody who'd like to leave at this point in time, I think we've answered all the questions. If you want to stay for a few more minutes and just, you know, do a little showing and chatting and so on, I'm more than happy to keep the meeting open, but I don't want to keep people here like into their dinner hour, or in Lana's case, you know, getting her day going. But like I say, thank you so much, ladies. This has been amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Okay,
so
thank
much,
you
Caroline. It's
so
so fun being here. Thanks so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. I really enjoy these. And like I say, it's part of the joy of KALs is getting together and knitting. And it's kind of hard to do that given how far apart we all live. So this kind of lets us have a little bit of in-betweenness on that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And really nice to meet Carrie too.
Yes.
Carrie is,
Huh?
Carrie is amazing.
Oh, thank you.
She is. She is.
I am turning into a pumpkin though, because it's after 9 o'clock. And it's
That's
my
what I figured.
bedtime.
So why don't you go off into your evening, Carrie, and just, you know, relax, put your feet up, you know, that kind of thing. Because I know
will see everybody in the forum
absolutely.
tomorrow. Talk to
So
you guys later.
I'm going to sign off too.
Okay.
Like you said, I have to get
Have a
started
wonderful
with
day,
the
Lana.
day.
Thank you again.
So much. Thanks.
Have a great
Nancy.
night,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Thanks, Caroline.
You're so welcome. So I know a fair number of us are hopping out now, but is
Yeah.
there anything else that we can help you with before we go?
You'll be back in 2 weeks.
We will be back in 2 weeks and it's the exact same link. So it's the same meeting, nothing changes. You can click on the same thing. We've also put the Zoom link on the main landing page for our website just to make it easy to find too. Because if you're me, you will immediately lose all emails, never see them again. Your computer will eat them. There will be lots of stuff behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So our wonderful technical people put that up on the main page to make it easier for everybody.
Right.
And
You're-
like I said, this will be recorded, so you can always go back and like page through if there's something that you wanted to see again.
Yeah. I was interested in your slip knot, Caroline.
The slip knot is like this interesting and sneaky little thing, and I really thank my mother for it. She had opinions about knitting, and one of them was the knot thing, and it's such a handy thing when you're starting from a point. And then the idea of just changing which end you're using, because that wouldn't have occurred to me, but you know, mom was a production knitter, so those sorts of things were something that she had to figure out.
Well, when I was 8, my father taught me how to knit.
Oh, wow.
And that was the first thing he taught me.
Nice. I love it.
You know, it was fun. And I've been knitting.
That's probably the first thing that my mom taught me too, but I was 4 and I pushed her to do it. And she was like, oh, you're not going to be able to do it. And I'm like, I will sew, because at 4 years old, of course, you know everything. And I was super excited when I talked her into it. And what I really focused more on, like in my mind's eye, I can picture it perfectly, but I'm more focused on the fact that she gave me this really vivid red yarn and these really pretty yellow needles. And they seemed huge at the time, but I still have them, and they're only a 4mm size, so they weren't huge. But
Right.
My first snapshot in my memory of it is there's about 8 stitches cast on already. So I'm like, I don't know if she showed me the slip knot or not, but I'm guessing she did.
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't make any sort of modifications for the fact that I was 4. She's like, I'm showing you this once and you better remember it, kid.
Well, I was 8, so I'm a little older than you were.
But it was, you know, it was, I swear it was in my blood. And all of my family for generations have been knitters and rug hookers, and we've all crocheted. Like, I know that when my mother passed away, I opened up a tin, and in there, as well as a creepy doll head, there was crochet that had been worked on. And I realized, going back and looking at it, that it had to be my great grandmother that had been working on that piece. And there it was, just sitting in a tin.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah, it's fun to go through things like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And not much of it survived in our family, so.
Right. Anyway, I've got to leave, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you very much. It's been very interesting, and I'll be back.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
I'll be there. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So we have some people still left. Was there anything else you guys wanted to chat about? Do you want to unmute? Do you want to show off some stuff? Aside from our stunning blacklight lightsaber shawl, which I covet desperately now. Oh, Kelly. Oh, you're going to make me do 2 of these, aren't you?
Yeah, and it was fun. I was looking for a black, and then you tried. I mean, I'm new to knitting. I've crocheted in the past, but I was trying to locate a black because I had already gotten your skeins, and I went to like 3 of the stores here in Calgary, and I just couldn't find one that would, and finally I found one. But yeah, it's harder than you think to try match like weight and kind of the consistency and stuff. So yeah, but I knew I wanted a black because I knew I wanted.
Oh, you absolutely needed that amazing contrast. Yeah, because it really is stars at night. Something interesting about black, I'll tell you a little bit about it.
Sure.
So I loathe and despise dyeing black now, because dyes have changed over the last few years. The quality of the pigments has degraded severely. So the pigments for blacks are found in India and China, and the sources that they're getting them from are more diluted. And so you get a lot of sediment in them. And sometimes your black dye will literally be like it has sand. So you'll dye your black yarn and you'll take it out, and then it'll look like there's sand sitting in the bottom of the pot. And it takes now anywhere between 2 to 4 times as much dye as it used to in order to dye a skein black. So even commercial yarns, I'm noticing that more and more lines of yarn are not bringing out a solid black color as part of it, because the black is getting so expensive and so challenging to dye.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a little side note, I was the one that had ordered, Wendy helped me a ton recently, and I had ordered the Eiffel Tower and the paperweight. So I appreciate all of her help and yours. And I think Heather was the one that maybe met me at the door that day. So thank you very much. That was really appreciated. Like, it's beautiful and I love it. And yeah, I'm here. So yeah, just thank you. You guys have been so fabulous to deal with. Yeah.
Thank you for working with us on that. For the rest of the people in the meeting, what that was is that we had a lovely order of yarn, and it can change depending on your season and your, the water and so on. So Eiffel Tower decided to get really rambunctious. And yeah, we had to change that out so you could have something that was a little more what you were hoping for.
No, so thank you so
That's
much.
Oh, you're welcome. All righty, well, we don't have too many people left, so I'm going to thank the rest of the people here, and I think we'll end the meeting and send you off to knit at home. Gotta say, Emma, wow. I know you're not expecting me to comment, but I'm like, I can see it, and it's really pretty, and holy smokes, has it grown. Mine is still shorter, but super secret projects I'm not allowed to talk about. Alrighty, well, we'll say goodnight to Tina, and I'm just going to keep and Kelly, and I'm just going to keep the Ancient Arts people on for just a moment, because I'm just going to thank them for their time. So. Okay, Tina, I'm just going to end the meeting for you. Thank you so much for coming out. Really appreciate it. And have a wonderful evening. Oh, I'm not going to do that, because if I do it this way, then you won't be able to come back next 2 weeks from now. Anyway, so wonderful people of Ancient Arts, in particular, Dan and Heather, also Emma, who has popped in to visit. Thank you so much for taking your evening and doing this. I really, really appreciate it. Heather, thank you for doing the draw totally without any warning at all, but I just felt like it just wasn't the right thing not to have one. I just enjoy doing them. It's so much fun. And Emma, I hope your week is going well, and in particular this day. Lovely to see you knitting, and yeah, it's so pretty.
Looks awesome.
I am glad that I chose those colors too. Anyway, thanks guys, and I'm going to end the meeting for all of us now, and you have a wonderful evening.
Good night.
Good night.